Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I am your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, October 2nd around here, and we got some big games to pick. We are getting into a week 6 that might not jump off the page to a lot of people, but has landmines all over the place. I think there's going to be a number of upsets this upcoming week, and we'll talk about a lot of those games to start off. We'll get into the two big games of the weekend. Vanderbilt, Alabama, one of the bigger games of the weekend, number 16 going to number 10 in the country, both coming off big-time wins, or Alabama coming off big-time win, Vanderbilt still undefeated on the season, and then we got Miami, Florida State, a huge one in there in Tallahassee, and Florida State badly needs the win going against a very, very good Miami team right now. Then we got some conference picks: Iowa State, Cincinnati, Texas, Florida, very much an upset spot there. Texas Tech, Houston, and a number of other things in that one. Then we'll do a little bit of a whip around. A number of teams that need a bounce back, including Georgia and Penn State. We'll get into Wisconsin, Michigan. We'll talk Boise State, Notre Dame, all that good stuff. And then we got some best bets for you. Went 3-5 last week, so hopefully we can turn things around, get back on the winning side of things this week. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing, because we got a number of things to talk about, and we'll start with the two big games of the weekend. We got big game predictions for you, and we'll start over there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Vanderbilt goes on the road to Alabama. Alabama favored by 10.5 in this game. Over under at 56 or 55.5. I believe it actually just moved down to 55.5, and it is going to be a 3:30 kick. This one's going to be really, really fun. This is two very interesting teams. Obviously, we had what happened last year. Diego Pavia has already said if Vanderbilt plays their football, they are going to win this game. There's no doubt about that. He feels very confident about this football team going into it. Obviously, he very well should. They're 5-0 right now. Wins over Virginia Tech, win over South Carolina, and it feels like people are trying to explain away Vanderbilt just a little bit right now. Not to say that they're an absolute national title favorite or they're absolutely going to the CFP or anything like that. This is a good football team, and they play really, really good offensively, and it's not exactly the same approach as it was a year ago, so we'll talk about it here in a second, but Kane Womack's got to make sure he's prepared for this Vanderbilt, not last year's, because they still pace it down, they still grind teams down, they still sit on the ball, but they don't run the ball quite as much as they did a year ago. They take shots more than they did a year ago. They are a much more, let's say, all-around offense this year than they were a year ago, and it's a huge difference in the approach that Vanderbilt brings. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in this one. Ty Simpson also said he doesn't want it to happen again. Period, end of story. They don't want to be as sloppy as they were. If you rewatch that game, Alabama probably should have won that game in a number of different ways. They played very, very sloppy, had a number of turnovers, gave up plays that they just don't normally give up, had the obvious, the crazy Malachi Moore situation. A lot of different things went wrong in that football game for Alabama. They come into, Vanderbilt now comes into Tuscaloosa for this one, and it would be a huge one, plain and simple. It would be a very interesting thing if Kalen DeBoer was 0-2 against Clark Lee and 2-0 against Kirby Smart, but that's the world that we live in college football, and Vanderbilt has all the ability in the world to go do this, mainly because Alabama's really struggled to run the football and stop the run. If Vanderbilt can control this game from a time of possession standpoint, they're in pretty good shape. They know exactly what they're doing. They know what script they want to play out. If you give them the ability to kind of dictate what this game's going to be, Vanderbilt's probably going to win this one, if I'm being totally honest. It's going to be really, really fun to watch this one unfold. Obviously, Alabama coming off the huge win over Georgia. You head into this one, you're thinking, if either of these teams, at least from where I'm sitting, if either of these teams want to make the CFP, I think they kind of need this one. Alabama already has the loss to Florida State, and if they lose this weekend, that's a loss to a two-loss team. You have a Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma still on deck, as well as a game against Auburn at the end. Wouldn't be ideal at all. And I think you'd be walking a tightrope, and considering how many teams in the SEC I think could end up 9-3, I think you might get lost in the shuffle at the end of the day if you are 9-3 as Alabama. For Vanderbilt, I think we understand that the CFP is probably not letting a 10-2 Vanderbilt in, especially if they miss the SEC championship, but still a tall order to even get to 10-2. They're undefeated right now, but if they lose this one, they still got LSU, Missouri, at Texas all in a row, and then Tennessee at the end of it. So it is going to be tough for one of these teams to make it if they don't find a way to win this game. I think the winner's in pretty good shape. Not to say the winner is going to make it, but I think it's fair to say the loser is in really bad shape going into the CFP, at least the race, the rest of the way. The players to watch, in my opinion, Junior Sherrill has been incredible for this football team. Already has 5 touchdowns on the year, the leading in that category, 225 yards through the air. Very talented guy, and a guy that can totally change this football game. If he gets one-on-one with a guy like Damani Jackson, I like Junior Sherrill to win that matchup, and I think it could be a huge moment for Vanderbilt where they're grinding you down, and then they make one big-time play. Obviously, they're going to be capable of making a number of them, but Junior Sherrill is going to make a number of them, and I think he could be the difference maker in this game. And then LT Overton, whenever you play a team like Vanderbilt that has so many option reads with Diego Pavia going off the edge or the running back going off the edge and Diego Pavia being able to pull it and go down the center inside the tackles, guys like LT Overton on the outside are going to be uniquely important. If they can find a way to keep their feet, make sure that they can still get the running back while accounting for Diego Pavia in the run game, as well as getting after him in the pass game, because they will drop back and pass more often in this game than they did a year ago. LT Overton's going to be massive in this game, and there's a number of guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball and really at the defensive line, that are not going to be playing for Alabama in this game. They're going to have to be ready to roll. Quay Rousseau, they just lost, I believe, for the year, if I'm not mistaken, and there's going to be someone else on that other side. They're going to have to be ready to roll. There's no doubt about that, because there's going to be a lot asked of them in this football game. The matchup to watch to me is Tim Beck against Kane Womack, because these are two guys that went at it last year, and Tim Beck got the better of Kane Womack by a good margin in that game. So now you look forward, and Kane Womack, he's been incredible since that Florida State game, has been mixing things up a lot more, has been playing around with a lot more coverages, and it really did hurt Georgia a week ago. Can he do that this week? Or is he preparing for a team that he saw last year, and Tim Beck's running not entirely different offense, but something different enough to at least catch Alabama off guard and make this a much tougher game than maybe Alabama fans are thinking right now. Obviously, they're going to be on their P's and Q's. Kane Womack will have his guys ready, but there's a lot of things the Tim Beck offense does that you can be as prepared in the world for, and you still might not be able to stop it, just because if you make the right read, if Diego Pavia makes the right read, that is, they're going to be off for 15 yards, and he tends to make the right read. But some keys to this game, Vandy's approach will be really interesting to me, because the big thing here is they are a little bit different this year. They love to take shots downfield. They're a little bit more aggressive on offense. They're a little bit less of this ground and pound. They still hold on to the ball. They still run the clock on offense, and they still, grind the clock down, but they're much less of a, outright run team this year than they were a year ago. What do they look like in this matchup? Because I do think it kind of benefits them to gear it down, to run the ball pretty consistently and try to lean on that, partly because that's Alabama's defense's weakness, and the other side because I don't know if you're going to get the same exact performance out of Ty Simpson, but you also want to keep the ball out of his hands. You don't want to push the ball into a guy's hands that played probably better football than just about anyone in the country a week ago against Georgia. Then you have Alabama on early downs. Alabama was incredible on third down a week ago. I believe finished 12 of 18 against Georgia. They put themselves in a lot of 3rd and 10s, a lot of 3rd and 9s, and then Ty Simpson just had to make a play, and he consistently made the play. He's an incredible football player that I think is going to consistently make those plays throughout the year, but the reality of the matter is you can't keep putting yourselves in those positions. Ty Simpson can only make so many plays on 3rd and 10, so Jamaria Miller is going to have to be huge. Savion Riley is going to have to be huge, and they're going to have to make plays in this run game. Not Savion Riley, excuse me. That's a different player from a different team, but at the end of the day, these guys are going to have to be huge in this run game, because if they're not, then it's going to be one of those moments where you're putting it all on Ty Simpson's shoulders. Then 1 or 2 mistakes makes a huge difference in this football game. And then the revenge factor. This is a very real thing. A lot of these guys' first bad moment as a college football player was at the hands of Vanderbilt. You have all those freshmen like Ryan Williams and Xavier Brown and all those guys on the back end of that defense that was really their first moment where they felt like we're not as good of a football team as I thought we were, and they were coming off a massive win against Georgia just like they are right now. I think these guys are going to be ready to roll. I think it's going to be very, very intense in there, and I think it's going to be close for about a half of this game. I think they're going to be battling, going back and forth. We're going to be tuning in. It's going to get really interesting. And then Ty Simpson makes a couple plays deep in this game. I think Alabama wins at 38-23. I think Vanderbilt puts up a good fight in this game. I don't know if they have enough defensively to slow down Alabama, and I just think Alabama has the athletes to slow down Vanderbilt enough. I think Vanderbilt offense will get going a little bit. I don't think it'll ever fully get off the ground, and Alabama gets a relatively comfortable win, but it'll probably be a little bit closer than that 15 point says. I think Alabama wins this one, though, at home, and gets a little bit of revenge on Vanderbilt, as weird as that sounds. Then this one, the huge one down there in Tallahassee, Florida. Miami goes on the road to number 18 Florida State. We have Miami favored by about 4.5 in this game, over under at 53.5. This one's going to be awesome. And I think there's a lot of people that are, I don't want to say dismissing Florida State, but they definitely are kind of rethinking this game. Is a Miami blowout? Can they just roll over this team? And Florida State goes back to what they were a year ago in the Alabama game, which is a total anomaly that will be looked back on as the craziest result of the season. I don't really see it that way. I think the Virginia game, I talked about it when I broke it down on Tuesday. I think that was kind of a perfect storm. I think there was a number of things working against Florida State in that football game, and I think they just kind of got away from them. I don't think that was a game that was super indicative of who Florida State is. Now, they have a number of things to figure out, plain and simple. There's no doubt about that. They have to be more consistent offensively. They can't get mistakes from Tommy Castellanos in this football game, because if you do, Miami's going to take full advantage. And they have to get more from that defense, particularly the defensive line, because you look at the Miami offensive line. Absolute nightmare. There's no doubt about that. Now, they did get 3 INTs last week, so they were able to take the ball away from Virginia, but they also gave up 211 on the ground. And if you allow that to Miami, you're not winning that football game. Plain and simple. Whenever Carson Beck gets over 200 yards rushing, you can feel pretty confident that he's going to make a number of plays with that time. So you got to figure out how you're going to get to Carson Beck. I think Tony White might be the most important person in this entire game. The Florida State defensive coordinator, he's got to get creative, because this is a very, very good group up front for Miami at the offensive line. And you have a guy in Carson Beck that you don't pressure him, he's going to tear you to pieces. That's just who he is. One way or another, you're going to have to find a way to get after this kid. Florida did a relatively good job. I believe got 13 pressures in that football game. So they did a pretty good job of getting after him and keeping him off the spot, making him a little bit nervous. And he made mistakes. And that football game played by far his worst game of the season. Florida State has to find a way to do that, and that really comes down to Tony White heating him up with cornerback blitzes, safeties coming off the edge, a linebacker coming down the A-gap, maybe multiple. Just play around with different things and see if you can get a couple of mistakes from a guy that, as of right now, just doesn't look very prone to making those mistakes. The big thing in this game that I think has been slightly overlooked as people have been talking about it is this is the first time Miami's playing away from home. And they're going into Tallahassee at night. It is going to be an incredible, incredible crowd. That fan base wants to win this one very badly, because they know they fall to 2 losses right after beating an Alabama team in week 1. They're going to be in a position that they feel like, is Billy Napier the guy again? It's going to become a huge conversation once again. Now, should it be is a totally different conversation that we can have in the hypothetical that they lose, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a huge moment for FSU if they want any chance to stay in the ACC race, to stay in the college football playoff race. They are going to have to find a way to win this football game. It's going to be incredible to watch this one unfold. But Florida State falls to 0-2 in the ACC. There's too many favorable schedules around the ACC with Duke and Georgia Tech and a couple other teams. Cal is another one that you're probably not going to find your way back into it if you're 0-2 going into this. And if they're 0-2 now, I have to assume they're going to drop one later as Florida State. For Miami, they could very well be fine. There's no doubt about that. But you're, again, in a position where tiebreakers are going to mean something when it comes down to the ACC title race. And you don't play a lot of those teams like a Georgia Tech where maybe they just get in because they didn't play you and they don't have a loss in conference, or they have one, but the tiebreakers work out in their advantage. Miami's got to find a way to win this game. It's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in this one, because I think you're going to have about 5 or 6 teams in the race down like 2 weeks left in the season for the ACC title. The question is, the 2 teams in it, or is it just one of them that's kind of pulling away from the pack just a little bit? The players to watch, Ashlyn Barker, we talked about getting to Carson Beck. He's been incredible at doing that. Had 2 sacks a week ago, or last game for Florida State, and played really, really good football in that Virginia game, no doubt about it. He was definitely their best defensive player, and probably got to be that again on Saturday. Now, the defensive backs have to play some really good football, but the only way that works is if the pass rush gets after Carson Beck. Ashlyn Barker's got to be a huge piece of that. And then we talked about the run game. If Miami can just lean on the ball here with Mark Fletcher, they're in really, really good shape. And I'd be thinking about them as a true national title contender because if you're able to just go lean on the ball, Mark Fletcher already has 5 touchdowns on the season, 388 yards. He is a guy that if you're able to just hand the ball back to him and let this crowd kind of be taken out of it by a 12-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to start the game, you're in really good shape the rest of the way. But that's going to be a tall order one way or another. I think Mark Fletcher's got to play a role in this football game because if Miami can't run the football, this thing gets a little bit sketchy pretty quickly. The matchup to watch, kind of what we were just talking about, the Miami offensive line against the Florida defensive line, because this could be the biggest mismatch in the entire game. It could also be a really fun matchup that's just between two totally filled with NFL talent lines that go after each other for 60 minutes. Now, the big time question is, what does Florida State look like? Because it wasn't that they got totally pushed around last week. They tackled really poorly at the line of scrimmage in a number of ways, especially on Jamari Taylor, the running back for Virginia. They have to find a way to do better with that. The defensive line did struggle at times as well. They're going to have to play better. There's no doubt about that. I think Darrell Jackson might be another hugely important player for this Florida State team because you got to be able to slow down the run. Don't necessarily have to do incredible things in the pass rush. You do have to get after Carson Beck, but at the end of the day, you slow down the run, you're able to drop more guys in coverage. At the very least, you're putting Carson Beck into very, very tight windows, and you're making him make plays that maybe he's a little bit more uncomfortable making. The keys to the game. Thomas Castellanos' legs are going to be huge because Ruben Bain is going to be Ruben Bain in this football game. He's an absolute nightmare coming off the edge for that Miami defensive line, and you're going to have to find a way out of it. You're going to have to make some plays with your legs, both scrambling and just read options, keeping them at bay, making sure they can't make a full decision right away and come fully downhill because you allow those guys to do that for 4 quarters, they're probably going to come up with 6 or 7 sacks. I don't think they're going to be able to do that with Tommy Castellanos' legs because that guy can get away from just about anything. He's going to have to get away from a number of things. If I had to imagine, on Saturday night, he's going to have to make plays, and he's going to have to make them off schedule, off platform. He's very good at doing that. It's going to have to be a huge part of the game, no doubt about it. We talked about it. Carson Beck's mistakes is going to be a huge one in this one. If he doesn't make a mistake, if he doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't put it in danger, I think Miami's able to win this football game. I don't want to say comfortably, but at the very least, they're able to win this football game and walk out undefeated. If he makes a couple of mistakes, that place is going to come alive in a hurry. That Gus Malzahn offense is going to get going, and then you're going to have a real problem on your hands. Because when that offense gets going, there's very few defenses in the country that are going to fully be able to stop it. And you have a guy on Carson Beck on the other side that has in the past let one mistake turn into 2, turn into 3, and then you get some really, really interesting times. And then this one's going to have rivalry juice. There's no doubt about it. This is the biggest Florida State-Miami game we've had in quite some time. I can't even remember the last time there was this much stakes on this game because Florida State losing last week obviously kind of dampers down the marquee top 10 matchup that it would have been hypothetically. It also makes it a little bit more desperate for Florida State in this football game, maybe adds a little bit more energy to that crowd. Now, nervous energy at that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be energy nonetheless, and I think this one's going to be really fun. I can't shake this feeling that Florida State's going to find a way. I don't know how. I don't know what they do. I don't know how Tony White finds a way to get to Carson Beck. I don't know how they turn him over. I don't know what Thomas Castellanos does in this football game, but they get the win. They find a way to do it, 30-27 at home. It's a weird place. Miami going on the road for the first time this year. They're prone to do one of these. Miami has always been prone to have one of these games where you look up at the end of it and you're thinking, how did they lose that game? I think this is it. I think Florida State finds a way. I think they're uber motivated after what happened last week. They got that extra day off, which matters as much as we'll see how much it matters at the end of the day. But I do think Florida State finds a way to win this football game. I just think that's what the ACC is this year. I think it's going to be weird all over the place, and I think this weekend will definitely bear that out. But it's an incredible 2 games. There's no doubt about that. I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to be Alabama-Vanderbilt being the number 1 game, or number 2 game probably, of the weekend going into this year, but that's where we are. It's going to be incredible to watch these ones unfold, but let's get into some conference matchups. After this break, we will jump into Iowa State-Cincinnati, Texas-Florida, Virginia-Louisville, a really interesting one over there in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll talk about that and a couple other games right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big games of the weekend. Vanderbilt goes on the road to Alabama, Miami on the road at Florida State. I'm going to pick Florida State in that one. I don't really know why, just got a feeling about that college football feeling you get around this time of year. I think Florida State wins that football game, but let's get into some big-time conference matchups. We got a couple of teams making their first conference game of the entire year. We got a couple of teams that are a little bit into this thing and are still undefeated and feeling really good about where they're sitting right now. But let's go ahead and jump into this. We got a couple of upset alerts in here. This might be one of them, but the team that would hypothetically being upset is not favored in this football game. Cincinnati is favored over Iowa State by 1.5 at home, over under at 54.5. This one's really, really fun. This is a huge Big 12 weekend. There's a number of games that are going to be massive. Iowa State coming off a dominating win over Arizona that had a little juice going into that football game. Cincinnati wins a crazy one against Kansas last weekend. Now you're in a position for a huge one, no doubt about it. Cincinnati is kind of just lurking around in that Big Ten, making big-time plays. Brendan Sorsby playing really good football. Iowa State playing some of the cleanest football in the entire country. Not a lot of teams have been able to really get them off schedule, get them out really uncomfortable. That's kind of by design. That's who Matt Campbell is. That's who the Cyclones are, and they've done an incredible job. If Cincinnati's able to win this one, they're 2-0 in the conference, and they got a schedule in front of them that is very doable, especially over the next couple of weeks. I think they get Oklahoma State. I think they get UCF. They get a couple of the, let's say, lighter teams in the Big 12. I don't think anyone's quite easy in the Big 12, quote-unquote, but at least the teams that they should be a little bit more favored over. And you have Iowa State on the other side that loses Jontez Williams in this football game. Going to be really interesting what that back end of that defense looks like for the Cyclones and what Brendan Sorsby can do against the back end of the defense that a little bit banged up right now. For Cincinnati, they've been incredibly good at running the football this year. They've struggled mightily against the pass, at least on the defensive side of the ball. They've done good against the run, stopping it. They've struggled against the pass, stopping it. And I think for Rocco Becht and the receiving core, they've kind of gotten going a little bit. Now, against that in that Arizona game, they were able to throw the ball around a little bit. That being said, they want to do work on the ground. That's the way they are. That's the way they go about business. Carson Hansen is one of the better football players on that team. So you're going to have to find a way to run the football if you're Iowa State. If you're Cincinnati, lean on Dante Corleone and that front seven, because if you find a way to slow this run game down, there's going to be an opening to win this game at home. I think this is going to be really interesting. I think both teams are going to be able to throw the ball pretty consistently in this football game. I think Cincinnati gets this one done. I think a lot of people are going to be looking up at the end of this weekend trying to figure out what these conferences look like. Results like this are not going to make it a whole lot easier. I think Cincinnati finds a way to win 27-24 at home. Maybe the biggest upset spot of the entire weekend. Number 9, Texas goes on the road to Florida. Texas favored by 6.5 in this game, over under at 41.5. This one's really interesting. You got two quarterbacks coming in that have played bad football. I think they would tell you that as of right now. Two very talented kids, Arch Manning and DJ Lagway, but they haven't been playing the level of football that they are accustomed to by any means, and it's really slowed down these offenses, slowed down these teams in a lot of ways, and I think everyone understands what's going to happen with Billy Napier at some point this season. When it happens, I don't know. I tend to believe it's going to happen after the 5th game, and I think we all know why that is. But at the end of the day, I think there's going to be an interesting thing that happens here, because you have a Florida team that seems to have a little bit of confidence right now. Now, all of this goes up to a game that obviously is huge for them. It could all be window dressing. We don't know. But it sounds like DJ Lagway has a lot of confidence coming out of the bye. It sounds like he is as healthy as he's been all year and maybe in his entire career at Florida. It sounds like Billy Napier feels really confident in what he sees from DJ Lagway in this offense, so maybe they get it going. Now, the big thing to remember here is it's probably going to rain during this matchup. It looks like it's going to be storming in Gainesville pretty much all day. Hopefully we won't have a lightning delay. Hopefully we won't have anything like that, but there is going to be some rain here. Do these quarterbacks even get a chance to get off the ground, and who can handle some of that craziness that we could encounter? Whose run game can step up to the challenge? Because Florida has not leaned on that run game very much. Texas really has. It hasn't necessarily yielded great results for them, but they've leaned on the run game a number of times throughout the season. Florida's kind of shied away from the run game in a lot of ways, and it's not necessarily Billy Napier's comfort zone without Jacoby Jackson in this game. Jaden Ball is going to have to be huge one way or another. It's going to be really interesting to see how they approach this football game and how much the weather really does play into it, because Arch Manning looked better against Sam Houston State. He now goes on the road to a really tough defense that, especially in the rain, if he makes a couple of mistakes, they could be going the other way for 6. And then this game totally changes. The fan base gets really into it, because I do think there's a reality here. If Texas jumps out to a 14-0 lead, a 17-0 lead, I think you might see a team and a fan base, I don't want to say roll over, I just think they're kind of done. I think they're tired. I think they understand what the reality of this situation is. I think they know their coach is out one way or another by the end of the year. I think there's a reality here where if Texas is able to come out, to put together 2 really good drives to start the game, shut down the Florida offense early, you're going to see that fan base and that crowd get quiet very, very quickly. On the flip side, if Florida is able to take the lead early, make a few plays early, the Swamp comes alive, things get really interesting in a hurry. Now, I don't think this one's going to be all that pretty. I don't think anyone's going to feel great about these quarterbacks coming out of it. I think the weather will have a lot to do with that, but I tend to believe people will not use that as a reason to go after these quarterbacks. At the end of the day, I think this one's going to be a little bit sloppy, a lot of running the football. I just don't see Florida being able to get the run going. Even with Jaden Ball, even with how good he has been this year, I think they're going to have a really hard time against this Texas front 7. I think Texas wins this one 24-13. I don't think it's pretty. I don't think it's really fun to watch all that much. I think Texas finds a way to win in what's probably going to be some pretty sloppy conditions down there in Gainesville. Number 24, Virginia. As crazy as that sounds, number 24, Virginia on the road at Louisville, and they're underdogs. By 6.5 points, Louisville is favored. The over-under at 62.5. This one's really interesting. Virginia favored for the first time since 2019. They go on the road to a tough Louisville team that has played really good football. Has kind of been overlooked just a little bit. I released my top 25 yesterday, if you saw that, and they're my number 26. I had them in there. Then I realized I didn't place LSU anywhere in my top 25, and I had to kind of reconfigure things. But at the end of the day, this is a very good Louisville team. They're in a position where they can find a way to win this game, and then they're the interesting team in the ACC. It's Georgia Tech, and then it's Virginia, now it's Louisville, because there's a lot of teams in the ACC that have these openings to make a little bit of a run, to win a couple of big games like this one, and then things get really interesting really in a hurry, and this Louisville team's really fun. There's no doubt about that. Isaac Brown's played some great football. Miller Moss getting more and more comfortable in this offense. They win a huge one against Pitt last week, and I think you're going to see 2 elite running backs go at it in this football game. You have Isaac Brown for Louisville. You have Jamari Taylor for Virginia. Going to be really interesting to watch how this game unfolds and how these quarterbacks play, because we know what Chandler Morris is capable of. We saw it last week. Now, did have a couple of turnovers in that game, no doubt about it, but at the end of the day, played really good football. On the other side, Miller Moss continues to get confident. I think it's going to be a really weird game. I think it's going to be a little bit up and down, a little bit all over the place. There's going to be big plays. There's going to be maybe some ugly plays here from time to time, but I think Louisville wins this one. I think they're physical enough to get this one done. 38-31. I think they get back and forth. It goes a little bit crazy, but Chris Bell, Isaac Brown, all those guys find a way to make enough plays in this game, and Louisville gets a big-time win and probably becomes the new ACC team we're talking about on Monday. Texas Tech goes on the road to Houston. This is a very interesting game to me, because you have a Texas Tech team that comes in with a lot of confidence, as they should. They've played about as good of football as just about anyone in the country. You have a Houston team kind of limping in after barely sneaking away from an Oregon State team that is not necessarily great right now. That's probably the nicest way I can put it. At the end of the day, they both walk in here 4-0, and they feel really, really confident. Houston's starting their Big 12 schedule. Obviously, Texas Tech had that huge win against Utah a couple of weeks ago. This is going to be really interesting. Barron Morton comes back for Texas Tech as the quarterback. The question is, how healthy is he? Because it is a true problem. It is a true neck problem, and the question is he fully healthy? Is he where he needs to be? Is he still kind of nursing that thing? Now, the bigger question is, how close to 100 would he have to be on the field? Because we all saw what Will Hammond did a week ago. So are they comfortable enough to say, we're going on the road to a Houston team that could give us trouble? but our guy's 80%, we got to be able to throw out Will? Or do they feel not super confident about that and they say he's at 80%, but we're probably going to need him for this one? It's going to be a really fun one. Houston's been really good at running the football. Obviously, Texas Tech's been great at stopping it. I think the big thing here is, can the quarterback run game keep Texas Tech at bay? If it can't, you're going to have that D-line just kind of teeing off on you all day, and Connor Wegman and Dean Connors and that run game in general is going to have a really long day. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch this one. Houston's pass defense has been one of the best in the entire country. This is going to be the toughest challenge by a mile. There's no doubt about that. I think Texas Tech finds a way to win this one 27-20. I think it's pretty close. I think some people tune into this one halfway through the third quarter because they're not expecting a game, and then they get a 6-point game, something like that, deep into this one. But I think Texas Tech finds a way to get this one done, and they continue moving on as the Big 12 favorite. Mississippi State at number 6, Texas A&M, another upset spot. Texas A&M favored by 14.5 in this game. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but the over-under set at 55.5. This one might be my favorite matchup of the weekend, if I'm being totally honest. I think Mississippi State is just a good football team that a lot of people are trying, again, to explain away in a lot of ways. They play really good offensive football, and on defense, they're not necessarily elite. They find a way. They find a way. They work really hard. They all rally to the football. They do enough on the defensive side of the ball. Now, obviously, last week kind of let it slip just a little bit, but they had Tennessee on the ropes, and they were one play away from finding a way to win that football game and walking into this one undefeated. So this is a good football team for A&M. They got to find a way to get a little bit back on track. Now, they were fine in the Auburn game. They did enough. They outgained them, I believe, almost fourfold in that game. You got to be able to finish off drives, and you got to be able to find that explosivity that really makes you special, makes you what you are in a lot of different ways. Mississippi State should give you those openings. That's the reality of that defense right now. They definitely have given openings down the football field. We saw it against Tennessee. We've seen it against a number of teams over the last little bit. And them running the football against Arizona State, that's kind of what got Arizona State back in the game. So maybe you lean on Le'Veon Moss again in this football game, but you do want to see that explosivity kind of return to this offense just a little bit. Obviously, you don't have to, totally empty the clip, hopefully, but at the end of the day, this is one where you probably want to see the A&M offense do what they've done early on in the season and make some big-time plays. Blake Shapen and Mississippi State, they're heading into a nightmare of an SEC schedule. I said they were going to clip up at least one more team. I tend to believe they're going to do that, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a very, very tough spot to do it. And the reality is this could be a good football team at the end of the year that has 5 wins because they're going into a nightmare of a schedule. I don't know how many wins are in there. This one probably going to be tough to find a way to get. But at the end of the day, they're playing with house money. They got a lot of juice going into this game. A&M, they've always found a way to kind of screw up these moments. So this is definitely a weird one. I think both teams are in a very good position. I think A&M sneaks away with this one. I think they win 31-21, but it's close late. I think they get a touchdown maybe with 2 minutes left or something to put it on ice, but I don't think this one's fully confident. I think this one's sketchy down to the absolute wire. I'll be totally honest with you. I think A&M sneaks away with this one, but Mississippi State's just one of those teams that I think everyone's just trying to convince themselves isn't as good as they're watching. They are. They're a good football team that's going to be able to put Texas A&M in tough positions, and I think they're going to be able to score some points and just make this one interesting. I don't think it's going to be crazy. I don't think they end up getting the win on the road, but you never know. In the SEC this year, it is all up in the air as far as I'm concerned. But a number of really good games there, a number of upset games that could very well happen. I could see Texas falling to Florida and then things going crazy at both of those places for totally different reasons around those head coaches. A number of upset games that could happen this upcoming weekend, and a couple more in this next segment. We'll do a little bit of a whip around, talk about some teams that need to get right, talk about some great quarterback battles that might be going under the radar, and a couple other things right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big-time conference matchups, some big-time upset potential with Houston playing Texas Tech. We have Mississippi State, Texas A&M. We have Florida, Texas. Some big-time games that could go opposite directions, and we're all looking around trying to figure out what happened this past weekend. could just be one of those weekends. But we'll get into that as it unfolds. Right now, let's get into a couple other games. Some teams that just have to get right, some teams that are going to be in matchups that might just go down to the wire. And let's talk about it right now. Let's start this thing off with an interesting one over there in Athens. Kentucky goes on the road to number 12, Georgia. Georgia favored by 20.5 in this game. Obviously, coming off the Alabama loss, they get a Kentucky team that I don't know what's going on with that quarterback position. I have no earthly idea who's going to start in this game. It's been Cutter Boley the last couple of weeks. Hasn't been great the last couple of weeks, so we'll see how that unfolds. Zach Calzada, obviously still an option there. It'll be interesting. At the very least, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I think it'll be Cutter Boley, but who knows at this point. For Georgia, they can't have any bad misses this year. That's the big thing with this football team. Obviously, losing that game to Alabama stinks, but that's not a bad miss. That's a good football team that you lost to. At the end of the day, if you're going to find a way to make it to the CFP, there's too many landmines on here. There's too many genuinely tough games to lose a game like Kentucky. Period. End of story. They're going to have to find a way to do it. Whenever Kentucky invites Georgia into Lexington, things get interesting. It goes 13-12, or a couple years ago, I believe it was 13-10, something like that. So it always gets weird whenever it's over in Lexington. When it's in Athens, the Dogs absolutely roll. I think they do that. I think Chauncey Bowens, the running back for Georgia, has a huge game in this one. Wisconsin at number 20, Michigan. This is a big noon kickoff. This is going to be a very interesting game, and one that, I don't know, just has a little bit more juice than maybe I think some people are thinking, plainly because I don't think Michigan's going to be able to run the football very consistently in this game. Now, I think they're going to be able to do enough. I do think Michigan wins this game. I'll give a little spoiler. They're favored by 17.5. I think that was kind of understood. But at the end of the day, if they're a CFP team, if they're a team that is going to make the CFP, they're going to be able to at least compete for a national title. They should be able to dominate here. Not necessarily totally roll over them, run for 400 yards, and feel like you're the best team that's ever played football. But at the end of the day, you saw what Alabama did to Wisconsin. That's roughly what Michigan should be able to do. Probably not the same style, probably not in the same way, but you got to find a way to roll over this football team, because this is not a team in Wisconsin that should really scare you all that much this season. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Wisconsin's still very good against the run. So can Michigan find a way to get the run game going? Obviously, Bryce Underwood makes that a little bit tougher to stop the run than it was against a team like Alabama that doesn't have that quarterback run game in there, but will be really interesting to watch. With Sherrone Moore back on the sideline, how do they utilize Bryce Underwood? Do they utilize his legs a little bit more in this game? Do they scale it back because they think they might not need it in this game? But at the end of the day, I think they're going to stop the run pretty well. I think they're going to sell out to stop the run. I think Bryce Underwood makes a couple of big throws. I don't think this is necessarily a coming out party, because I think people know that he's pretty darn good at football at this point, but I do think he has a big-time game here. I think they win by 20. I think they prove that they are very well on their way to a CFP this year. Number 7, Penn State on the road at UCLA. Penn State kind of just gets a vacation to LA, which is a pretty cool thing for a number of Big Ten teams, specifically this year when you're talking about UCLA. You're going to be able to beat this team. You should be able to beat them by a lot. And then just enjoy LA, I guess. Just go out, have a good time, because this is essentially a vacation with some football mixed in. You should be able to roll over this team. You're favored by 25.5. You should be able to cover that 25.5 as far as I'm concerned. For Penn State, it's as simple as I want to see Drew Aller do the thing. I want to see him go out there, let it rip. I really do mean this. I don't think this is a game where you put the ball in your pocket, you run the football, you make sure you just lean on them. Obviously, you're going to have to do that at some point this season. I want to see Drew Aller go out there and throw for 400 yards. I want him to do absolutely crazy stuff in this game, build his confidence, and go into the rest of the season thinking this is a guy that can rip the ball around the football field. Obviously, we know he has the arm talent. I want to see that guy's confidence go up, because early in that football game against Oregon, he had just about none. The second he hit that ball to Devontae Ross, it was a different football player. Obviously, you make the mistake at the end of the game that kind of puts a sour taste in your mouth, but the reality of the matter is this kid can rip the ball around. You have to be able to trust him. If you can't trust him, you're not going to be able to win these big games down the road. Let him do the thing against this team, because even if things go poorly, you're still probably winning this game by 14 points. So rip the ball around. Play around with things on offense. Don't get too cute. Just line it up. Let this guy throw the balls that he is very capable of throwing, and win this game by 28 plus points. Boise State on the road at number 21 Notre Dame. I don't know if this one's overlooked. It's one of those games where Boise State got dominated by South Florida in week one. They've looked relatively good since. They got a big win over App State last week. They're a team that still is kind of finding itself, and I still think it's a very good team. Sire Gaines is finding himself at running back. They have a number of guys on the outside that can make some big plays. Obviously, Maddox Madsen is a confident and competent quarterback here. For Notre Dame, it's really simple here. Do you have any let up? Is there a moment here where you let yourself kind of take your foot off the gas? Obviously, you have that 2-2 record, so you shouldn't. That's the reality. You should know that you have to win out the rest of the way if you want any chance of making the CFP, plain and simple. You should understand that. There is a world here where they see this Boise State team and they see the 19.5-point spread and they just take their foot off the gas just a little bit. And they open the door and a team like Boise State comes in and kicks it down. I tend to believe Notre Dame's able to win this game. I tend to believe they're going to be able to win it relatively comfortably. I think there's a world here where they open the door just a little bit and Boise State's able to make a couple of plays and we look up late in the third quarter and Boise State's up by 3 points and we're trying to figure out what Notre Dame's going to do to find their way back into the CFP race. I think they win. I think they win relatively comfortably. I think there's an opening here, though, that some people might kind of dismiss. Maybe my favorite quarterback battle of the entire weekend. It might be outdone by one we're going to talk about here in a second, but Washington at Maryland, they go all the way across the country after a tough game against Ohio State where they just got physically beaten up. I'll just be totally honest with you. But Damon Williams Jr. against Malik Washington. Malik Washington, if you have not watched this kid, watch him. A true freshman over there at Maryland that is playing incredibly good football, is a guy that's going to do incredible things over the next couple of years, hopefully for the Terps. I'm very hopeful that he will stick around up there and be able to do some incredible things for Maryland going over the next couple of seasons. As of right now, they are 6.5-point dogs to a team that just lost at home and has to travel all the way across the country. Could be a really interesting spot here for Maryland. They're an undefeated team. If they win this game, who knows what happens with Maryland the rest of the way. I tend to believe they're not necessarily a Big Ten title threat, but there's a moment here where Maryland can get a big-time win and suddenly become the talk of the town. Maybe be a ranked team and be in the mix going forward. But I think Washington's able to get this one done. I think leaning on Jonah Coleman's going to be a big thing in this game, and they're able to run the football just enough on Maryland. I think it's going to be incredibly close. I don't fully get the 6.5 line. If anything, I would have this at 1.5 or 2.5. I think it's going to be a very close football game. But at the end of the day, I think Washington's run game is enough to get this one done. I think there's going to be enough on the defensive side of the ball that Washington can do to at least confuse Malik Washington some. I don't think it's going to be a perfect game from that defense, but I'll say Jonah Coleman and that Washington defense does enough. They get a close win on the road. Minnesota at number 1 Ohio State. Ohio State just keeps rolling along, and now they get the Golden Gophers coming to town. Drake Lindsey is another guy at quarterback that I think is a little bit under-talked about. Very fun redshirt freshman at Minnesota that is kind of ripping the ball around. I don't expect him to roll in this football game because I don't expect anyone to roll in any football game against Ohio State this year, especially at quarterback. I said it earlier, I believe on Twitter earlier this week, I don't think anyone's scoring 21 points on this football team. I'll be totally honest. In this entire season, maybe Oregon in a playoff or Big Ten title situation, maybe a team like Alabama if they put it all together. But at the end of the day, I don't even think them. I think there's a nightmare of a defense. I think Minnesota is going to be lucky to find their way to 10, if I'm being totally honest in this game. The interesting thing here is you do have a trip to Illinois on deck if you're Ohio State. Maybe that's a little bit of an opening for Minnesota to make this thing close early. We've seen what Ohio State's doing this year. It is not the same approach. They are very much a run-first team, and then we'll take those little dink-and-dunk passes, will hurt you. At some point, they're going to take the top off. It's not going to be in this football game. I think they win it. Maybe that 23.5 is worth it, if I'm being totally honest, because they just don't have the need to dominate this Minnesota team to the degree that they probably would have 4 or 5 years ago, beating them 45-6. Now it's probably 30-3, but it's still plenty impressive. This is my favorite quarterback battle of the week. There are so many incredible battles between quarterbacks, but this one's really fun. Darian Mensah and Jaron Keave-Sangapula-Tele are two NFL talents, plain and simple. These guys throw the football all over the field, and I think the funny thing about Duke, they lose 2 games early on in the season out of conference. they're still 2-0 in the conference. And they win this one on the road all the way across the country. I think you're in a position where you could run the table and be the team to talk about in the ACC. You could be the team that finds a way to the ACC title against a Florida State or a Miami or maybe a Georgia Tech. Whoever knows how that conference ends up playing out. But I think this one's going to be really fun. I think JKS has been about as fun as any quarterback in the entire country this year. There's been a little bit up and down play from him as of late. Obviously, that San Diego State game really did get away from him, but I think Duke finds a way to get this one done. I think it's going to be really fun. I think they go back and forth. I think it's a great reason to stay up till probably about 1 a.m. my time. But at the end of the day, I think this one's going to be really fun. I think Duke finds a way to get this one done and probably sets up a huge matchup with Georgia Tech coming to town in a couple of weeks. But I'll take Duke in this one. I'll take Darian Mensah to win the QB battle that I just cannot wait for in week 6. But it's a really fun weekend. There's a number of games where you look at them and maybe at face value, they don't really jump off the page. They're not the craziest things in the world. And then you start thinking about it and you think, Texas really hasn't looked all that good this year. Maybe they do lose to Florida. Texas Tech does have that quarterback injury. Maybe they fall to Houston. I think this is one of those weekends where you just have a lot of different things happen very, very quickly. And you're looking up at the end of it thinking, I don't know who's going to win any of these conferences, but we'll get to it all, obviously. Our last segment, right after this break, we're going to get into the best bets. I have a number of them coming for you this week. Didn't do too well last week, so hopefully we can bounce back this week with a couple of favorites that I feel weirdly confident about. We'll get into it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some odds and ends of games. A number of games that won't be all that close. A couple of games that are going to be incredible. And a couple of quarterback battles that I cannot wait for and set up for some really incredible drafts in the future. But let's focus on right now. Let's talk about my best bets for this upcoming weekend because we got some favorites that I feel confident in, and that's always a weird place to be. There's always some lines that you feel are a little bit fishy because they feel too easy in some ways, but at the end of the day, I am going out on a limb on a couple of these. This might seem out on a limb. I'm going to go Georgia minus 20.5 against Kentucky. I said it before, when Kentucky goes to Athens, it just doesn't go well for the Wildcats. They fall on their face, and I do think there's a world here where this Georgia offense looks at what they did on Saturday against Alabama and says, we just got to be more aggressive. We got to be able to push the ball downfield, and I think Gunnar Stockton looks at the tape and says, I left a little bit out there. There's a number of guys that are running open or were going to be running open. If he just sticks in there just a little bit longer, I think the confidence is going to be flowing in this football game. I think it's going to be a huge one, and I think Georgia just dominates this team. It really does come down to the Kentucky's quarterback situation. How are they going to score 14 points in this game? I have no earthly idea. Even against a Georgia secondary that has been a little bit all over the place, they'll take advantage if you give them the chance. And I think there's going to be a world here where no matter what quarterback out there for the Wildcats, I don't think they're making a lot of great passes. I think Georgia's able to come up with a couple of picks, and this one gets pretty ugly in Athens pretty quickly. I'll take Baylor minus 6.5 over Kansas State. This one almost feels too easy, and I think that probably means I should go the other way. But at the end of the day, if I'm getting Sawyer Robertson being able to score about 38 or 40 points a game against a team that I haven't seen score more than 31, I don't think that's going to bode well for Kansas State. I think the only time they scored more than 30 this year was against North Dakota, and they're in a position right now where Baylor's just rolling. I think they're going to be able to score a ton in this football game. I think Sawyer Robertson is, again, one of those guys that, for whatever reason, people just kind of overlook at the quarterback position. Now, KSU has been good against the pass, so that is something to watch in this game. This is going to be the toughest challenge they've had, and also, I think Bryson Washington has one of those games in him. I don't know how consistent he's going to be throughout the entirety of the year. I know he has one of those games where he just puts on an incredible performance and kind of carries them to a win. I think this could very well be the moment. I think Baylor wins this one pretty comfortably, at least by a touchdown. I'm going to take Texas minus 6.5 over Florida. This one feels very dangerous. I'll be totally honest with you. But when I look at Florida right now, I don't know how they get more than maybe 14 points in this game against Texas. I really don't. This is a Florida offense that has been all over the place. They really love to pass the ball, and there's so much stuff that they're doing throwing the football. It's also going to be raining in this game. And weirdly enough, their best football player is their running back, Jaden Baugh. They just haven't been using him nearly as much as they probably should have. I think they're in a position, Florida is, where they're running into the wrong team at the wrong time and with the wrong conditions. If they're going to have to run the football consistently, I just don't think this Texas defensive line is going to get pushed around all that much. I think Florida is going to really struggle to score in this game. And for Texas, I don't think it's going to be perfect. I think it's going to be pretty ugly at times for Arch Manning. Obviously, I don't think the rain's going to help. I think that offensive line's going to do enough. And I think that run game is a little bit more confident because they have been leaned on early in the season. That's something Sark has kind of made a point on, as has said a number of times, that he wants the run game to be a facet that they can lean on late in games. I think they're going to have to do it on Saturday, and I think they're going to be able to. It won't be perfect from either offense. I don't think it'll be perfect from either quarterback. I think there will be plenty of people that are still out on these quarterbacks after this weekend, but I think Texas is able to go into Gainesville and at least get a 7-point win. I'll take Louisville, Virginia over 62.5. This one's a little bit aggressive, but just a very, very fun game going on over there in Louisville. You have some awesome running backs on both sides. You have two quarterbacks that continue to play better football as the season goes on. I think it could be like 24-24 at halftime. I think we're in for an absolute shootout, and I love Louisville. I think they're being overlooked just a little bit. I think they do love to run the football, but when you have the explosive runners that they do have, it doesn't really matter. You can slow things down just a little bit and still be able to score 31 points. So I think they're in a position where they're going to be really fighting for this football game. I think Virginia really only has one way to win in general, and it's score a lot of points. I think they're going to be able to do that in this game, and I think this one at least gets over 63, and I think we're in a position for an incredible finish in this one. I'll take Houston plus 10.5 versus Texas Tech. This one might be a little bit more dangerous than some of the others because of how good Texas Tech has looked. I think Willie Fritz is that good at designing offensive plays, especially in the run game, that I think this defensive line is going to be a little bit confused from Texas Tech. I think they're going to play good football. I think Texas Tech ends up winning this game, but I think there's going to be enough wrinkles to where they just can't go downhill quite as quickly as they would want to. They can't just attack start to finish, and I think Houston, coming off a game against Oregon State where they very well could have lost, I think it's going to kind of focus them once more. I think Texas Tech might be a little bit all over the place with a couple of big games coming up in the Big 12. You go on the road to a team that isn't ranked. Obviously, they're undefeated. They've played some great football, but if you're Texas Tech, you got to feel pretty confident that you can win this game. I think there's enough of an opening for Houston to make this one close. I think Texas Tech finds a way to win, but I think Willie Fritz in that run game is able to at least neutralize that defensive line just a little bit, and Houston's able to keep this one close. I'm going to take Alabama Vanderbilt over 55.5. Getting this one down 1 point from 56.5 is absolutely massive for this bet, but at the end of the day, another game I'm incredibly excited for because I don't know if either team can stop the other one. I don't know if Vanderbilt can stop Ty Simpson in this passing offense. I don't know if Alabama can stop Diego Pavia in this rushing offense. So I think you're in a position where it's going to be a fight. I think there are going to be really a ton of points early in this game. I think Alabama is able to pull away, make some adjustments on defense, but at the end of the day, I do think there's a world where Diego Pavia is just too darn good of a football player to not make plays in this game. Ty Simpson just too locked in to not make plays in this game, so I think this one's going to be down to the wire, really, really fun, but I do think Alabama finds a way to win. Doesn't matter for this one. I think there's going to be tons of points in this football game. Another one, we got down 1 point from 56.5 to 55.5. Duke, Cal, just to keep you awake into the morning, into Sunday morning just a little bit. These are two quarterbacks that are downright different. It's going to be so much fun to watch this game unfold and watch their careers unfold over the next little bit, but absolutely love JKS. They're in a position where the travel for Duke is going to be interesting to watch. You know, how early can that offense really get off the ground and get things going? Can Cal jump all over them and then Duke's playing catch-up? No matter what, I think there's going to be points in this game. I think both these quarterbacks kind of rip the ball down the football field. I think this one's going to be up and down the field, and I think it's going to be easier to stay up for this one than maybe you're thinking right now. It's a 10:30 kick, but I think it's going to be well worth your time and plenty of points out there in Cal. Mississippi State plus 14.5 versus Texas A&M. No one should have more than 2 touchdown favorites in the SEC unless you're playing Kentucky. I apologize to the Wildcats, but at the end of the day, this Mississippi State team's a good team. I think they're going to find a way to get this thing going. I think they're going to find a way to just sell out and stop the run against A&M. Obviously, A&M can beat you over the top. There's no doubt about that. But I think they're in a position where their coverage corners are actually really good. I think they have the ability to kind of leave them out there just a little bit. It won't be as easy as a number of the games that they played before, but I think they'll be able to do enough defensively to at least confuse A&M. And then I think their offense is just going to make plays. I think it's going to be really hard to keep down the Jeff Lebby offense throughout this year. I think there's going to be a number of moments where Mississippi State's totally out of a football game. They're down 17. Everything's going wrong. And then Brennan Thompson makes one big play. And then Anthony Evans makes one big play, and they're fully back in the football game. So I think Mississippi State, this kind of just a gut pick. I think Mississippi State's a really fun team. I think they find a way to keep it close in just about every single matchup they play this year, specifically this one. I think this one's going to be relatively close. I think A&M ends up winning it. I think it ends up looking a little bit bigger than it, or a little bit more comfortable than it ends up, than it is going to be, but I do think Mississippi State keeps this one close. I just think 14.5 is way too much in an SEC like this one. So going to be really interesting to watch all of that unfold. Hopefully we do a little bit better with those bets this time around, but that'll do it for this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment, do all of that great stuff across all the platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all of that great stuff. A lot of different stuff coming your way. Posted a blog about my top 25. Going to do some Heisman stuff here pretty soon. Going to do a lot of different things coming up here pretty soon with that, and posting on the Twitter, doing all that great stuff. So please do follow on all those pages. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys on Sunday to break down an incredible Week 6 slate.